our book study. We're talking about the afterwards, Beyond Hope, and 10 tools for embracing your finitude. So we'll just give a few moments here to let all of our streaming platforms and all that line up as it's coming through, and then we'll be getting started here. Okay, here we are. There we go. Welcome, my friends. Here we are to our final episode of our book club, 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals. It's kind of funny and wild to be at this point where we're bringing it to a close on these final reflections, final chapters, and we're going to talk about kind of some practical tips and this idea of moving beyond hope. I'll share some of my kind of personal reflections here as well. If you're not already, you can comment book club, book study in the comments, and I will send you a reflection of this video, and you'll have access to all the videos that we've done over the last 14 weeks. That's kind of wild. So please, during this, drop your questions, comments, reflections. Hopefully I'll have the time to kind of respond to those at the end. And just to engage with dialogue with each other. I mean, that's one of the most important things that I've found is that we need dialogue. We need conversant ideas, conversant opinions. And I think social media can act in two really different big ways. One is it can increase polarization because we can just listen to the things that we like, the things that we know. But the other thing that can happen is that we can get exposed to ideas that we wouldn't have come across otherwise. And we grow as we grow in our capacity to engage with ideas, thoughts, reflections that are not our own. So we're looking at the afterwards here for Beyond Hope in 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals, a life-changing book. And I love how Berkman opens this up. He finishes the last chapter talking about how important it is to embrace our limits. And then he says, except there's a problem. Everything is screwed. Perhaps you've noticed. And we can have this idea and this belief that we need to get things together, things need to get fixed. But it's not actually the case, that need to repair everything, that need to kind of get everything perfect. It's part of the problem, I think, that can lead us into these places, this sense of existential overwhelm and urgency. And so Berkman talks about how in a time such as this, when there's so much political strife, when there's so much polarization, when there's wars and economic crises, why would we care about time management? And he says, well, because all life really is time management. And in times such as these, when there are crises, when there are overwhelms, he says, if you broaden your perspective a little bit, it's obvious that in periods of anxiety and darkness, the questions of using our time take on a fresh urgency. Our success or our failure in responding to the challenges before us are based entirely on how well we use the available time in our day. And our time is limited. Our lives are limited. That's the name of this book, is 4,000 Weeks, because that's the amount of weeks that the average person has to live. So I think I did the calculation, and I have about 2,500 weeks left. When we can see it on that perspective, we can realize that's not much time at all. And on the one hand, that can overwhelm us and make us afraid and feel like, what do I need to do? But on the other hand, it can liberate us to realize there are important things worth doing. Am I going to let those important things be dictated by forces outside of me? Or am I going to choose to step into them importantly on my own? And so one of the things that he's urging us to do in this afterword is to move beyond hope. The danger with hope, and I think there's probably a distinction here between using hope as a defense or embracing hope as a virtue. But one of the dangers about hope is that we can wait for something outside of us to resolve the problems and can disempower ourselves. He says that what hope means oftentimes is disavowing our own capacity to change things. It means that we surrender our power to the very forces that we want to be fighting. But when we can kind of transcend hope, when we stop expecting somebody else to come, when we stop expecting other people to fix things, what we have the opportunity to do is to actually step in with action. We no longer have to hope at all. We simply do the work. When we stop hoping that the awful situation that we're in will somehow resolve itself, when we stop hoping that the situation will not get worse, when we stop hoping in this way, we're finally free, truly free, to honestly start to work to resolve it. When we let go of this idea that some savior is going to come, we are called to act. And just as a kind of an aside, I see this all the time in relationships. People are in relationships that they don't like, that are not fruitful. And they're hoping that their partner will change. They're hoping that the circumstance will change. Because it can be frightening to step into the realization that we have both the power and the responsibility to act in a way that actually changes things. And that's what Berkman is inviting us to in Beyond Hope. He says this book is an extended argument for the empowering potential of giving up hope. Embracing our limitations means giving up the hope that the right techniques or a bit more effort or a bit more productivity, and we would be able to meet other people's limitless demands. We'd be able to realize every ambition, or we could do every good thing and change the world in this ultimate way. It means giving up the hope of feeling in total and complete control. And the realization is that when we let go of the hope to be in complete control, when we actually surrender, then we're empowered to do something about it. So we can actually let go of this idea that everything needs to turn out okay, and then instead decide, well, in a world that's burning, how do I want to act? If it feels like our culture or society or families or relationships are crumbling, well, then how do I want to show up in them? Because when we let go of our need to control the outcome, that's the problem, is our need to guarantee an outcome. This brings anxiety, this brings overwhelm. And when we can let go of that impossible need, give up the hope of having the power to change everything in the way that we want, well, then we can actually ask, well, if I can't change everything, what do I want to focus on? What do I want to change? And so we'll be focusing on what Berkman calls 10 tools for embracing our finitude. He says there's this realization that time is always running out. It's a revolution. It's a revelation when we begin to internalize our limitations. The result need not be despair, but an energizing surge of motivation. You come to see that the terrible eventuality, which you'd spent your life always bracing against because you're too afraid of it happening, it's already happened. And yet, here you are. Every difficult thing that you've gone through in your life, you've made it through. And as a psychotherapist, I'm blanking on his name right now, says often, our greatest nightmares and fears about the future are almost always the traumas and the crises that we've faced in our past. So instead of fearing the future, when we can step into the present and actually be curious, when we can step into the present and ask, well, like, if I can't change everything, what do I want to do? How do I want to show up? What we find is actually freedom and agency. The agency to do something that's actually meaningful in this moment to you. Not meaningful as, oh, it's just something I want, but the deeply meaningful things, the meaning that we find when we sit with ourselves and we ask, what do I want for me? What do I want for my life? And so you realize that you never really needed the feeling of security that you felt so desperate to attain. This is a liberation. Once you no longer need to convince yourself that the world isn't filled with uncertainty and tragedy, you are free to focus on doing what you can to help. And you no longer need to convince yourself that you'll be able to do everything that needs doing. When you can realize that you don't need to do everything that needs to be done, well, then you can focus on the few things in these 4,000 weeks of our lives that count. So instead of trying to convince ourselves that everything will turn out fine and that there's some idyllic space where life opens up and there's a fairy tale ending, we can wake up to what there is right now and we can respond fully to it. This is cause for relief, he says in this last paragraph. The average human lifespan is absurdly, terrifyingly, insultingly short. But that isn't a reason for unremitting despair or for living in an anxiety-fueled panic about making the most of your limited time. It's the cause for relief. You get to give up something that was always impossible. The quest to become optimized, infinitely capable, emotionally invincible, fully independent. And then you get to roll up your sleeves and start working on what's gloriously possible instead. So much of what I see as a therapist is people who come to therapy really seeking idealism, seeking perfectionism, seeking to become totally defendable, totally protected, totally secure. But as Erich Fromm says, our task is not to feel secure, but rather it's to tolerate insecurity. And so he gives us in this appendix 10 tools for embracing your finitude. I think these are really nice kind of clear pointers on how to put these things throughout the book into actual practice. To step more fully into reality as it is right now, letting go of our limitless hopes and allowing ourselves to be limited actually helps us to be more productive, to be more happy, and to live our lives more fully. So the first recommendation here is to adopt a fixed approach to productivity. So rather than trying to have this belief that we can get everything done, you begin from the assumption that tough choices are inevitable. If you can't get everything done, then you have to make the tough choice of what will I do? What will I choose to do? And so Berkman's suggestion here is to keep 2 to-do lists. You keep an open list and a closed list. And the open list is a list on which you put absolutely everything, every possible to do. And this is an endless list. It's never going to get completed. It's never going to end. But the closed list has a fixed set of entries, and that's the one that you work on. So the closed list has a fixed number of entries, 10 at most, and the rule is you can't add a new task until the first one's completed. So in this, I've found this really helpful with reading. I have a habit of kind of picking up a book, starting to read it, getting into another book, starting to read it, and I never really finish books. And that's something that I've wanted to shift. So the commitment that I've made in this last year is that I will only read 2 books at a time, actually 3, because one of those is kind of just is more reading in my prayer time and in my spiritual life. And in this, what I've learned is that I've actually chipped away at a book consistently over and over and over again, and it's brought me to be much more intentional with the books that I do read. It's given me a lot more thought. Instead of like, ooh, this is interesting, I'm gonna start reading this, and then this is interesting, and I'm gonna start reading that, and then actually kind of feeling bad that I'm not making my way through anything, I've become a lot more intentional with what do I want to read. And then when I'm doing that, and I find a new book that I want to read, I actually kind of focus on locking down to it. So one of the other strategies here that's really helpful for the fixed volume approach is just setting a certain amount of time to do something. So say you want to write, or say you're an artist, or say you want to go on a run, say whatever it could be. Rather than saying, okay, well, that means I need to do this amount of time and like this huge amount, it can begin with 10 minutes a day. For anybody who's struggling with mental health, I really believe this. Doing pretty much anything for just 10 minutes a day will make you feel better. If you can just consistently, 5 days out of the week, do something for 10 minutes, it could be reading, it could be writing, it could be calling a friend. But if you can set that fixed amount of time, small, and just continue to chip away at it, you will be amazed at how much it affects you. So the second logic that he gives is on page 237. He says, serialize, serialize, serialize. So focus on one big project at a time. At most, it could be one project at work or one project at home, and see that through to completion. Because what you'll learn is to tolerate that insecurity. And this is kind of what I was talking about with reading. And instead of making a little bit of progress and then getting anxious and then doing something else and then doing something else and never getting around to anything, you will get better at incrementally tolerating the anxiety of not getting as much done as you'd like. And this is so key, that ability to be bored, that ability to feel like you're not making progress. This is essential to doing anything at all well. So you can't do everything, but if you can commit to only doing the things that you pick and you see them through, you're going to be a lot more intentional with what you do pick. And then you're actually going to learn to neglect the things that aren't as important, because neglecting things, it's impossible. And this kind of ties in with the third point that he gives here. Decide in advance what you want to fail at. And this is pretty counterintuitive in a society that's focused on achievement. What Berkman welcomes us into is strategic underachievement. And he says, nominate in advance the areas in your life where you won't expect excellence of yourself. That is, you focus your time and energy not on those things exclusively. When you can't do everything, you feel ashamed and you give up. But when you decide in advance the things that you're going to suck at, when you decide in advance the things that you're going to bomb at, you actually have the emotional focus to focus on the important things. So in this last few months, for example, my wife and I, we've kind of decided that keeping our bedroom clean is just not the priority right now. Now, cleanliness and orderliness, it is important to us. But as we're building a business, as we're focusing on building therapy practice, as we're focusing on so many things, we've just realized like that's not an area that we really have the bandwidth for. So it's not saying that it doesn't matter, but it's, as it says here, when you decide in advance the things that you're going to bomb, you remove the sting of shame. A poorly kept lawn or cluttered kitchen is less troubling when you've pre-selected lawn care or kitchen tidiness as the goals that you will devote zero energy to. And one of the other things he suggests here is you can also choose to fail on a cyclical basis. So there may be a time when you show up and work is just not going to be your number one priority. And you're going to focus instead on your relationships with your kids, your relationship with your spouse. Where there may be times or seasons where you don't have as many resources to give to friendships or relationships or social activities or volunteering. And instead, he says, instead of living with this guilt that we're not doing anything, we are predetermining the things that we fail at. We're removing that shame so that we can focus on where our attention is allocated. He says, this is a way to replace the high-pressure quest for a work-life balance, which is impossible. Because we're going to have a conscious and intentional form of imbalance. And so we are going to focus on the roles that are most important and allow ourselves to not be excellent at the other ones. And then seasonally, we can change that as well. So the fourth tool for embracing our finitude is to focus on what you've already completed, not just what's left to complete. This is a really excellent tool from cognitive behavioral therapy, especially when we're stuck in a rut of depression or overwhelm. There's so many things that you're doing on a daily basis that actually are really important and are worthwhile and are really good. But we usually don't qualify them. We usually just focus on the things that we're not doing. So here, when you focus on what you've already completed, it's a very simple technique. You keep a notebook or you keep a note in your phones, and throughout the day, when you get something done, you write it down, right? So throughout the day, when you go to work, you write, I went to work. When you submit an email, you write, I submitted an email. When you've cleaned the kitchen, you write, I've cleaned the kitchen. When you've made dinner, and what you do is you compile this list and you realize there's so much more that you're achieving than you realize. And he says that this is a helpful alternative because we normally feel ourselves in a productivity debt. We wake up and we feel like there's so many things that are undone. We need to earn back that debt by the end of the day. We don't focus on how many things that we are doing through the day. So it's a very simple technique where you just simply start writing down the things that you've already done. Because small wins are one of the most important things to build a sense of momentum, build a sense of confidence. There are no big wins without small wins. And if you discount the small wins, you'll never be able to recognize or fulfill the big wins. So the second thing here is to consolidate your caring. Bergman talks about social media as a machine for getting you to spend your time caring about the wrong things. It's a machine for us to care about too many things. And I see this for myself right now. I've kind of shifted a focus on more focusing on building my therapy practice than I am on the social media side of things. And what can be hard is that when I do get on social media, I can see, I see so many people talking about, okay, this is how to optimize your profile. This is how to gain views. This is how to make better carousels. This is about how to hook retention. I see really people doing very, very cool videos, things that are just very intellectually deep, things that have really cool cuts. And it's really easy immediately for me to start comparing myself. Oh, this person's doing this, or this person made a lot of money, or this person's had this many views, or this person's doing this kind of consistency. And so when we're consistently exposed on social media to all these things that other people are doing, we can shift where we feel like our attention is for caring. And so instead, in those moments, what's really helpful for me is, okay, what am I consolidating my caring about right now? For me, it's building the business, taking care of my family. That's really it. Taking care of my employees, taking care of my team, building a culture in which people are taken care of. And that means that I'm intentionally saying that's where my caring goes. What's difficult is that we can live in a world right now where we're exposed to so many things, so many atrocities, so many difficulties, so many social movements, so many opportunities to engage with people, so many opportunities to do projects, and we can't do them all. And so one of the things that Bergman says here is that once you grasp that mechanism operating here, this existential overwhelm, it becomes easier to consciously pick your battles in charity, activism, or politics. You decide that your spare time will be focused on this one thing at the expense of others because we just can't do it all. And you finally realize that to make a difference at anything, you have to focus your finite capacity to care. You don't have an infinite capacity to do everything. And so rather than being overwhelmed with everything, you focus on singular items and say, this is where my attention, this is where my focus, this is where my care is going to go in the next years. He says, and I'm interested for all you too, what it's like when you guys are engaging on social media or just the world at large, the overwhelm that you feel by how many things there are that really deserve advocacy, things that deserve time, deserve attention. Maybe it's things in your community. How overwhelming that is. I'm interested to see here how it might feel spread thin for you all. The other thing here, and I think this is really important, he says, embrace boring and single purpose technology. You can't combat everything on social media or on the internet. But what you can do is you can make your device, your phone, as boring as possible. And you see it right now, right? Mine is grayscale, it's black and white. You can go into your settings, and this is just one of the small ways that I did it. And you can turn your phone on to black and white, but you can also automate that. So for me, one of the things that I've done is um, in the morning, I have a automation on my phone. So at 9 a.m., my phone turns to black and white mode. And then at noon, it turns to black and white mode again. And at 3, it turns to black and white mode again. And this is because in general, I don't need to see color, but there's some times when I'm looking at a picture or something that I want it to be more vibrant, but I don't need that all the time. So my phone is continually switching back to grayscale or black and white mode so that I'm not completely inundated by this barrage of dopamine and these colors that are working neurobiologically on our need to survive. The other thing here is choosing devices with one purpose. So something else that I found that was remarkably helpful is it's really easy for me to get consumed in news that I actually don't care about. And so just deleting the news feed from my iPhone, like it's easy for it to swipe up and then I'm reading articles that really aren't a place where my focus could be right now. And so just deleting that thing. So deleting email from your phone, deleting work apps from your phone, and choosing how to use technology with intentionality is a helpful way to help us to make sure that we're spending our time where we want to spend it, not just reactively where we're getting drawn into spending it. The 7th tool that he says for embracing our finitude is to seek out novelty in the mundane. And this is one of my favorite points here. He says the standard advice is that as we get older, we get more used to life and things don't have as much flash. Things aren't quite as exciting anymore. Childhood has all this novelty, all this newness, and so it's really stimulating. As we move into adulthood, things become more familiar and there's less novelty. The standard advice is to try to cram your life with as much novel experiences as possible. And it doesn't work because it just creates this existential overwhelm, this feeling of, oh, I need to travel to be exciting. Oh, I need to go to new restaurants. I need to go to new places. I need to do more exciting things. It just creates the pressure to do more. And the pressure to do more fries us. It fries our nervous system. It fries our anxiety. But instead, the key and an alternative is to pay more attention to every moment, no matter how mundane. Boredom is a state of the mind to not engage with this moment. We usually face boredom by trying to find something more to do, but that actually just leads to this excessive experience of boredom because then in the next moment we have to fill it with time. We have to fill it with time. And instead, we want to find novelty not by doing radically different things, but by plunging more deeply into the life that you already have. So even right now, you might be listening to this. One option is just say, oh, well, I'll look for something else that's more interesting. And you may do that. But the other option is to say, okay, what if I actually sat with these ideas? I reflected on my life. What if rather than asking the thing in front of me to engage me more, I actually opened up my heart, my mind, my personhood to receive more from the reality right in front of us? This moment is completely new. And the cure for boredom isn't in activity, it's in receptivity to the moment right in front of us. So if you can experience life with twice the usual intensity, well, then your experience of life will be twice as full as it currently is. And it will feel like it's more full. If you can simply pay attention to the colors in front of you, the sounds around you right now, the feelings of the bodies, the feelings of your breath. So really doing anything that draws your attention more fully into what you're doing in the present moment. And one of the most helpful ways to do this is the training of mindfulness. Mindfulness is the practice where we focus on doing less rather than doing more. And that'll actually be one of his last points as well. This point 8 on 10 tools for embracing your finitude is really an excellent one. It might be my favorite or my second favorite. He says that we, out of this desire to control how time unfolds, when we're presented with a challenging moment or a challenging relationship, we can fall into this stance of trying to control the outcome. So we control how somebody is treating us. We control how a conversation is going. We can try to make sure that we assure ourselves of the outcome of any given situation. This just tightens our mind like a fist. It causes us to be anxious. It causes us to be afraid. It causes us to be unsure of the next moment. But the suggestion here is that rather than stepping into control, if we can deliberately adopt an attitude of curiosity, in which our goal is not to achieve a particular outcome, but rather it's to figure out what's in front of us. And in a relationship, if there's a difficult relational experience, if we can become curious about the figure who is the human being that we're with, if we can become curious about what they're saying, what they're defending, what they're attacking, what they're upset about, this curiosity assuages the anxiety and the control and actually allows us to be with reality as it is instead of fighting to control it. Curiosity is a stance well situated to the inherent unpredictability of life with others because it can be satisfied. This is the key with it. Curiosity can be satisfied with either the person acting in the way that we want or don't want. So this is something my wife and I did a few years ago. We did an experiment to see what would happen in our lives, what would happen in our relationship if we didn't watch movies or TV for a year. But we didn't approach it with this white knuckle. We're going to try to control our behavior and we're going to try to abstain from this. We're going to try to restrict ourselves. It wasn't that at all. It was curiosity. It was an experiment. We genuinely said, we realized that we were watching a lot of movies and filling our time with TV. And in a conversation, we asked ourselves, well, what would happen if we didn't watch movies or TV? What would we fill our time with? And so we did an experiment to see what will we fill our time with if we didn't watch movies or TV. What came out of it, what was interesting was actually what came out of it at first was a lot more conflict because we didn't have TV and movies to kind of constantly be checking out. Instead, we realized that these little things, these little jabs, these little hiccups, they started bugging us. So we started out having a little bit more conflict. And then we started deepening our relationship, deepening our conversations. We really fell in love with listening to books. We fell in love with going on walks in the evening. We started drawing. We started expressing ourselves. And so when we can approach things with curiosity, curiosity is always bigger than anxiety. When we can even turn towards anxiety with curiosity, everything shifts because we step out of this fight or flight anxious state and step into this moment where we explore what might happen here? So when we choose curiosity, this choice to wonder what will happen next, over worrying, hoping, and trying to feel certain that this or that thing will happen next, we actually find that we're able to be at peace with reality. And then we're actually disposed to step into it, not as we want it to be, but as it is. We can actually approach this as an experiment. Something that is important as a therapist is to allow silence rather than filling silence at each moment. This is especially important in group work. And sometimes there's silence and I can feel this pressure of I should say something as a group facilitator. But instead, what I remind myself is, I want to do an experiment. I want to see if I allow this moment to stay open rather than filling it from my anxiety, who might speak? Who might say something? So I'm choosing to do something differently as an experiment to see how does it affect this moment? And a lot of times what happens is somebody else says something really important and it stimulates a meaningful dialogue. I like this last point too, of the 10 tools to embrace your finitude. Tool number 9, cultivating instantaneous, compulsive generosity. He says the meditation teacher Joseph Goldstein teaches that whenever a generous impulse arises in your mind, to give money, to check on a friend, to send an email thanking someone for their work, act on that impulse right away, rather than putting it off till later. Because we can feel this need of like, oh, I don't have the time, or I want to say something really nice, or I can't show up as fully as I want right now. And that usually leaves us waiting till we feel in control of our time. I'm so guilty of this. Waiting till I have more time to send this text. Waiting till I have more time to send this message. And it never gets sent. But this adaptation of compulsive, impulsive generosity, when I feel the moment to send a voice memo, when I feel a moment to send a text, instead of waiting to be able to get the right words or to be able to express myself exactly as I want, saying, you know what? And as he says, while your colleagues might appreciate a nicely worded message of praise more than a hastily worded one, the latter is vastly preferable to what's most likely to happen if you put it off, which is that you'll never get around to sending that message at all. And so the final practice here is one of my favorites, something that I do every morning, try to do every morning. For embracing our finitude is the practice of doing nothing. Blaise Pascal writes, I have discovered that all the unhappiness of humanity arises from one single fact, that they cannot stay quietly in their own chamber. And this is true. I believe this more than ever before. We are inundated by noise. Even here on social media, I think it's especially apparent. There's so much activity, so much noise. Our moments in our day are filled not by punctuations of the breath, not by looking at the sky or the clouds or the weather, but checking our phones, sending a message. We are constantly doing. And so it's no wonder that anxiety is rising and obsessive compulsive behaviors are rising, because we're consistently practicing obsession and compulsion. We feel a feeling of anxiety and we assuage it by pulling out our phone. We feel a feeling of anxiety and we assuage it by pulling out our phone. This does not change with the intention alone. You have to practice. This is one of the things that I think is one of the most resonant points that I hold on to as a therapist. You don't change on accident, you change on purpose. And in order to change, you have to practice. It doesn't have to be big. But he says, if you can't bear the discomfort of not acting, you're far more likely to make a poor choice with your time, simply to feel as if you're acting. You make choices that are stressful, like hurrying to the next thing, or you feel like you have to spend every moment feeling productive, and then that time never arrives. So we want to train ourselves to do nothing. And that's really impossible. But what we can do is train ourselves to do less. And so he talks here about the meditation teacher who teaches a do nothing meditation. And what you do here is you set your timer for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And then you sit down and you stop trying to do anything. And then every time you notice yourself trying to do something, like breathing, like focusing on the breath, like thinking, you just step back into doing nothing. And so, of course, it's impossible. We cannot stop thinking. And that's not even really the point of meditation. But the point is rather to step back over and over and over again, so that we can be more fully present here. Because there's a capacity of the mind to think, to do things. But there's also a capacity beyond the mind, which is ironically what mindfulness is really about, which is simply to observe, to be present, to realize that I'm here beyond powers of myself. And I can just witness this moment as it unfolds. Doing nothing is harder than nothing. No, sorry. Nothing is harder than to do nothing. But to get better at it is to begin to regain our autonomy, to stop being motivated by the attempt to evade how reality feels, and rather to be here with it as it is. And so the call of this book, those are the 10 techniques. If you want those techniques, you can comment book club. I'll send them out in an email with a reflection, with a recording of this video. Comment book club, and I'll send you this recording with my own reflection in those 10 points. The calling of this book is to wake up from the delusion that we could ever have complete control in this life. To realize that our lives are so remarkably short. And we are thrown into a reality with so many forces outside of our control that are acting on us. We can't change the things that are acting on us, but what we can do is we can respond to them differently. And when we can recognize how many of our beliefs are beliefs for perfection, beliefs that someday we'll get it all together, are actually causing our unhappiness, we can learn to let them go and be here in this moment as it is. We're surrendering not our autonomy. We're surrendering our need to control outcomes. And when we surrender our need to control outcomes, what we are actually given is the ability to respond. You cannot change everything. You can't be in complete control. But you can surrender the need to be in control. And this is another form of freedom. The freedom from the need to be in control. This is surrender. And it's not surrendering our choice, it's actually stepping in, because when we surrender our need for things to go a certain way, we're faced with a much more important question. Regardless of how things turn out, how do I want to be in this moment? And that's a question of your values. Who am I becoming in this moment? How am I choosing to inhabit this moment, this reality, this life? And so 4,000 weeks, time management for mortals, is about giving up the false hope that one day we'll have it all together. You won't, and neither will I. Every human is just figuring it out. Nobody really has it together. But what we can do is we can let go of the delusion of control and embrace something that's much more trustworthy, uncertainty. And in that, learning how to step in and hold uncertainty with poise and wisdom. So thank you for being here. We've been reading 4,000 Weeks, Time Managed for Mortals. If you'd like a copy of this recording, you comment book club. I'll add you to my email list, and you can also get access to the other 14 reflections and the other 14 chapters that we've been doing. Thank you for being here. I'll have to hop out right now, but if there's been anything that's been touching from this, if there's been anything that's moving, I'd love to get a message for you, or maybe you can drop it in the comments. But thank you for walking me in this. This book has really been life-changing for me as I'm learning to embrace my limitations rather than to try to escape them, and learning to just be here in this naked moment as it is. So thank you so much. If you'd like to join the email list, comment book club, and I'll send you a DM with a link and send you the reflection. So I hope you take good care, and I hope you can be filled with the peace and the freedom to be here as you, to respond to this question of, if I cannot control everything in my life, if I can't control this moment, how do I want to show up anyway? If I can't control the outcome, how do I want to respond? What are the values that guide my life? And what does it mean to live by those values in this moment? Finding the freedom from the need to be in control. So, take good care. Thank you so much for being here. If you want those reflections, you can comment book club in the comments here, and I'll send them along. All right, peace.